Welcome to Crossroads, a show by the Epic Times where we bring you insights beyond the headlines. Now, as always, don't forget to hit the like button. Help us get this live stream pushed out to more people. Briefly, folks, some breaking news. You might have seen it yesterday. Donald Trump, abruptly it seems, left G7. And right around that time, also started posting on Truth Social, telling people in Iran to get out of Tehran, the main city. He has clarified the United States is not getting involved in the war between Israel and Iran. I know a lot of people are concerned about that, saying, are we going to war? As of now, the United States is not getting involved. Iran did launch several rocket attacks on Israel. As far as I saw, none of those really made it through. Israel is now striking Iranian weapon sites. They're going after the capabilities of Iran to develop nuclear weapons. Anybody concerned right now this is going to erupt into World War III? So far, Russia doesn't seem they're interested in getting involved. There are reports of China supplying, maybe weapons to Iran. Beyond that, this is not expanding, and so I will keep you updated on it. Also, very briefly, also breaking news, FBI Director Kash Patel has now handed over evidence to Congress, alleging that they were aware in 2020, there were reports coming out in the agencies that the Chinese Communist Party was printing and had plans to make fake driver's licenses with the intent of getting mail-in ballots to impact our elections. Apparently this was hidden from the American public. The report was kind of pushed out, but it was also reported that they did find a large supply coming into the United States of printed driver's licenses. And so there maybe is some credibility to those concerns. We'll see what that means when they investigate this. Kash Patel has now handed over the evidence to Congress. Now, again, all very fresh news. We don't have much details on it, but I will keep you updated. So let's jump first into the first story of the day. Mass surveillance could be causing mass paranoia. And that's concerning because of how much surveillance there is right now. New studies show that surveillance actually impacts the human brain. And some people say, well, maybe it reinforces good behavior. It doesn't seem to be that way. It may actually be a cause for an epidemic of stress impacting all of us. The Hill reported this: being surveilled changes the brain, new research suggests, and it isn't always for the better. It says in the modern era, it's easy to feel under constant surveillance between the presence of security cameras, doorbell cameras, the sale of your data to third-party companies and social media expectations to share your life online. It may feel like you're always under watch. It notes that feeling of being watched affects unconscious processing in the brain, a new study says, and it can have concerning impacts on mental health. We have a mental health crisis, not just in this country, but a lot of places right now. It says studies about how people have behaved when being watched have long been a part of psychology, and previous work has led to conclusions that surveillance could be used to encourage better behavior in people. That was the theory. But it says newer research has found that being watched can come with negative consequences, affecting memory and cognition. The latest study found that unconscious processes were affected by being watched, with participants in a study performing faster when under surveillance. That may seem like a positive thing, it says, but scientists say it puts the brain in constant fight or flight mode. You never get a break, in other words. Something that says that can be stressful and taxing. So if you feel constantly stressed, constantly worn out, maybe it's because you're in constant fight or flight mode because of surveillance. If you notice your memory isn't as sharp, it's possible some of this could be caused by the situation we've created for ourselves, where, look, basically everything we do, whether online or in the real world, is being surveilled. And also, given that tech has overflowed so much into the real world, we're also dealing with large-scale surveillance. Even when you're not on the internet, even when you're not at work, you're constantly being watched, whether by corporations or cameras or something else. And look, of course, it's still much more severe in other countries. North Korea, one of the big examples of a surveillance state. Recently, we got even more details of what their surveillance state looks like. TechSpot had this. It said a smartphone smuggled out of North Korea is offering a rare and unsettling glimpse of the extent of control Kim Jong-un's regime exerts over its own citizens, down to the very words they type. While the device appears outwardly similar to any modern smartphone, its software reveals a far more impressive reality. It says the phone was featured in a BBC video which showed it powering on with an animated North Korean flag waving across the screen. It notes that while the report did not specify the brand, the design and user interface closely resemble those of a Huawei or Honor device, in other words, Chinese smartphones. It's unclear, it says, whether these companies officially sell phones in North Korea, but if they do, the devices are likely customized with state-approved software designed to restrict functionality and facilitate government surveillance. One of the more revealing and darkly amusing features, it says, was the phone's automatic censorship of words deemed problematic by the state. For instance, when users typed appa, a South Korean term used to refer to an older brother or a boyfriend, the phone automatically replaced it with comrade. It notes a warning would then appear admonishing the user that appa could only refer to an older sibling. And if you typed in South Korea, it says, it would trigger another change, the phrase automatically replaced with puppet state, reflecting the language used in official North Korean rhetoric. And notes then came more unsettling features. The phone silently captured a screenshot every 5 minutes, storing the images in a hidden folder that users couldn't access. And notes as well, according to the BBC, authorities could later review these images to monitor the user's activity. Now, I think even George Orwell could not have imagined we would create such a society for ourselves of constant surveillance, something like that. And look, if that sounds concerning, if you're like, wow, crazy North Korean surveillance, those features are not limited to North Korea. Actually, I'd say most of us live with very similar surveillance and very similar censorship, even right here in the United States. Only it happens mostly at the corporate level, not the government level. We live under constant corporate surveillance because you give them access to these things in the terms of services. And of course, companies and even governments buy the data from these surveillance companies, which means even though the governments aren't doing it, they're buying the data from companies that do it. But also in terms of the other forms of censorship they found, like the phone automatically altering words, like you type something in and it changes it to something else, or giving warnings if you type something. That's also not limited to North Korea. That's actually common under the Chinese Communist Party. A lot of devices in China do that as well, especially social media companies in China. I would actually wonder whether Chinese telecom companies are creating devices for export with those features already built into them. And of course, as they're taking over the tech space, whether that could come here as well. Now, surveillance is also becoming a much broader issue, even in otherwise free countries, even right here in the United States. And we're actually finding out more of it. There are now reports that American gun owners have been under surveillance. They've been watching you, gun owners of America. Town Hall said this. Senator Rand Paul, a Republican from Kentucky, chairman of the Senate Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee, is demanding answers from the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, the ATF, about its surveillance of American gun owners. It notes that Gun Owners of America, GOA, exposed the existence of the program created under former President Joe Biden back in March, a brand new surveillance system, which we're only now finding out about. It notes the organization discovered that the ATF and FBI have been using the National Instant Criminal Background Checks, the NICS system, to spy on gun-related purchases among residents of states with strict gun control laws like California and New York. In other words, maybe you don't own a gun, but maybe you go on the internet and you buy an optic, or you buy some ammunition at a store or something like that. While that could suggest you have an unregistered gun now, couldn't it? And if you have an unregistered gun, well, maybe they're going to come after you. They're watching what you buy if it's related to firearms, and then they're targeting you based on that. It notes that one of the objectives appears to be looking for people purchasing firearms parts that could be used to assemble guns that might be prohibited under state law, like a ghost gun, or maybe you're making alterations to a gun, or anything like that. It notes that arrests have also been made on this. It says this method was used to target Brooklyn native Dexter Taylor who is currently serving a 10-year sentence in prison for building his own firearms. And of course, that may sound crazy in New York. If you move outside New York, there's a lot of guys who do that as a hobby. Now look, that's still not as bad as life under North Korea or the Chinese Communist Party. At least, we can own guns here. At least we have that. But the issue is raising concerns over our constitutional rights because look, under the Constitution, you're allowed to own firearms. That includes protections under the Second Amendment on gun rights, but it also includes restrictions on illegal searches and seizures. It used to be the case. If they want to surveil you, they need to have a warrant. They can't just search you without a warrant. They can't surveil you for no reason, right? At least according to the good old Constitution. But now it seems that surveillance is turning into a constant thing, with or without a warrant. And again, part of that is because of the private systems, businesses that have that type of surveillance, which can then be purchased by agencies or otherwise, or again, requested access to from government agencies when they do want to surveil somebody, or even where we're getting to now, AI surveillance that flags things when it sees something potentially problematic. In other words, you are constantly being monitored, constantly. And if you dare do anything that's suspicious, well, it will put off a little bing and they might look into it. Now, this isn't necessarily a partisan issue either, I would say. There was recent controversy even over the White House under Trump contracting with a data analytics company that's Palantir. One example of this, and a lot of conservatives were mad about it. Newsweek said, the White House has contracted Palantir, a Colorado-based analytics company co-founded by Trump supporter Peter Thiel, to assist in compiling a database of personal information on American citizens, according to unnamed government officials and Palantir employees who spoke with the New York Times. Take it with a grain of salt. It's New York Times and unnamed sources, and we tend to know how credible or lack thereof that is. And notes the purported deal follows project talks Palantir had with Social Security Administration and the Department of Education. Now look, details on that are still thin. Keep in mind also it's unnamed sources from New York Times. So again, take that with a grain of salt. But it's also possible that, if this is happening, the context would be important. It's possible this is more about just data analytics. And that could be important for a few things. It could be important for elections or even just looking at where the American public stands on issues. Because remember, one of the issues the Trump administration has right now. Recently, Donald Trump was calling out news agencies for cooking their poll numbers. When they say lowest polling in history, and another poll saying highest polling in history, or a poll comes out and they say Americans reject this issue, and then another poll comes out and says Americans broadly accept this issue. Now, the accusation Trump had was that some news outlets were using dishonest methods on public support polls for different policies. And that's a big deal because the government, they cannot rely on media for data anymore. If they can't rely on media for data, where do they get their data from? Now, it does make sense then they'd have to turn to alternative organizations to see where public sentiment actually is on different issues. Because policy usually looks at sentiment, where do voters fall on this issue? What do they really care about when they try to make their next moves? The media in a normal, free, functioning society does that, but when the media is dishonest, they can't rely on it, so they have to find other methods. Now, look, of course, we don't fully know what the data at Palantir could be used for. That's one possibility. It could also be possible this could play into the elections. Because remember, back when Trump was first running for office, all the way back in 2015, 10 years ago, there was the scandal around Cambridge Analytica. Anyone remember that? The Cambridge Analytica scandal they made. Basically what happened was Trump was accused of using data that was harvested from Facebook and then used that for political targeting in the elections. Now, in all honesty, the scandal didn't have much to stand on. That was considered normal until Trump did it. The media made a scandal out of something that was not scandalous before that. Other politicians had used almost the exact same methods for election data, and they were praised for doing it, being like Look at this, high-tech presidency. Look at this cutting-edge administration. Look at this campaign engaging people on the internet. Other politicians who did it were praised by a lot of the media for doing the exact same thing. But that did raise an important point, though. The way that data can be used for political targeting. And again, that's the media these days. They make scandals out of the normal and make the normal into scandals, right? Now, it probably does also make it hard for public officials to know where the public sentiment is on different policies, though, if they have nothing to go on, if nothing is dependable. And so, again, maybe we'll get some answers on what they're actually using it for. But also, speaking of data getting skewed, the Chinese Communist Party is launching yet another propaganda campaign. This time their propaganda campaign is openly using online influencers, and they're trying to get YouTubers and TikTokers and everybody else to carry the messages of the Chinese Communist Party. Bloomberg said this, it's coming to the surface. China is inviting American influencers to join a 10-day, all-expense-paid trip through the country this July as part of Beijing's efforts to boost people-to-people exchanges and showcase the, quote, real China. In other words, you're going to be in the Truman Show. They're going to take you there, and every person you meet is an actor, and everything they show you is pre-planned. The good old Potemkin villages of every communist propaganda tour that they've been doing since, again, the Soviet Union. And it's the initiative titled China Global Youth Influencer Exchange Program. Seeks to enlist young social media influencers with at least 300,000 followers to collaborate with Chinese content creators, according to the recruitment post by Chinese state-affiliated media outlets, including the China Youth Daily. They do similar things already with Hollywood, by the way. If you want to get your movie into Hollywood, they say, well, just co-produce it with a Chinese company. They'll put all the CCP propaganda in it, and then you're allowed to show your movie in China. Now, I should note, when it comes to the CCP doing this big media invite, this influencer invite, this is not new. The Soviet Union used to do campaigns like that during the Cold War. And it was a way to get propaganda published in American magazines and newspapers. It's basically the same method the CCP is using here. Actually, there's a great interview that was done with Yuri Bezmenov on this. He was a propagandist in Russia. He used to run influence campaigns working for the KGB exactly like this, and then defected to the West and then revealed everything he was doing. This is an interview with him in 1984 with G. Edward Griffin discussing how he used to hold propaganda tours exactly like this for news outlets like Life magazine and Look magazine and all the, again, Western journalists and influencers. Watch this.
In 1967, the KGB attached me to this magazine, Look magazine. A group of 12 people arrived to USSR from United States to cover the 50th anniversary of October Socialist Revolution in my country. From the first page to the last page, it was a package of lies, propaganda cliché, which were presented to American readers as opinions and deductions of American journalists. Nothing could be far from truth. These were not opinions. They were not opinions at all. They were the clichés which the Soviet propaganda wants American public to think that they think. If it does make any sense at all. It sure does, because from the viewpoint of the Soviet propaganda, although there are some subtle criticism of the Soviet system, the basic message is that Russia today is a nice, functioning, efficient system supported by majority of population. That's the biggest lie. And of course, American intellectuals and journalists from Look magazine elaborated on that untruth in various different ways. They intellectualized that lie. They found all kinds of justifications for telling lies to American public.
Excuse me, it was partly your job to make sure that they got these ideas,
yes,
and accepted them as their own ideas.
Right. Actually, even before they arrived to USSR, and they paid astronomical sum of money for that visit, they were submitted, this Novosti Press agency developed so-called backgrounders, 20-25 pages of information and opinions which were presented to the journalists even before they bought their tickets to Moscow. They had to analyze this situation, and judging on their reaction to that backgrounder, the local Novosti representative or local Soviet diplomat in Washington, D.C. would assess whether they be given visa to USSR or not.
So they were selected ahead of time.
Yes, they were pre-selected very carefully, and there is not much chance for honest journalists to arrive to USSR and to stay there for one.
Now, does that sound familiar? Well, if it does, it's because what he was doing in the Soviet Union is almost the exact same method, the exact same propaganda line the Chinese Communist Party is trying to push right now in the United States using American influencers. Instead of going to these magazines, though, they're going to these, kind of clueless kids oftentimes on the internet who, again, have followers of at least 300,000 people. Actually, the CCP even has a direct term for this type of propaganda, this method. They refer to it as the borrowed boat strategy. That's what the CCP calls this. Basically what that means, rather than just publish propaganda and lies through their own state media, they try to borrow the boat, in other words, borrow the vessel of outside news outlets and influencers. They try to get other people to carry CCP propaganda. And then what happens, the Chinese Communist Party can reference that for their own propaganda and then feed off of it, right? That's how they create information campaigns. Just like what Bezmenov warned about. Then, as of now, it's all lies. And you might be seeing a lot more of it because the CCP is now offering them all expense paid trips to China, and they're getting big old propaganda tours just like we saw during the Cold War. Now, this issue is also coming to the forefront right now. Retired General Jack Keane actually spoke about how the United States is target one for the CCP. This was him on Fox News last week. Watch this.
China is conducting the most comprehensive penetration of our society since we were formed 250 years ago, 249 years now. And we've never seen anything quite like this. And it's so comprehensive. Cyber espionage, penetrating our critical infrastructure. And what our intelligence people are telling us publicly is that they're remaining in that infrastructure in the sense that they're sleeping inside those capabilities, telecommunication, food supply, pharmaceutical, drugs, transportation, the list goes on. And in the event there's conflict with China in the Pacific, they would attempt to defeat the American people at home and break their will to support the war. And here we have a biological pathogen smuggling into the country that could attack our agriculture and ultimately our food source. And I think this is more exploration than anything else to detect and see how they can penetrate and how comprehensive this could be for the future. So, yeah, I mean, we are target one for the Chinese communists, and we have got to make sure we have a comprehensive defense in this country against it.
Yeah, I mean,
it's also being revealed this isn't even just about propaganda and information. It's actually meant to even alter government policy. They want to use this to change the laws of the United States. Just the News said this. It says a national security watchdog group is asking members of Congress to take a closer look at an energy transition advocacy nonprofit that has ties to the Chinese Communist Party, the CCP. And it's according to State Armor, the watchdog group, nonprofits are coordinating with U.S. climate groups to influence climate policy, advance the interests of the CCP, and undermine U.S. national security. You getting that? So climate laws being put in place in the United States, the Chinese Communist Party is trying to influence them because they control the market on it. And if we're focused on really unreliable new sources of energy, they're dominating the markets on nuclear and coal, and also supplying us with subverted forms of like solar panels with kill switches. And notes this. A new report by State Armor argues the CCP is co-opting the American Progressive Climate Change Lobby to advance a transition away from fossil fuels. The alternative technologies being pushed by this lobby, according to the report, create significant economic and geopolitical advantages by undermining U.S. energy dominance and leaving it dependent on Chinese supply chains for its energy production. And it notes as well, besides the dependency on China for energy supply chains, meaning we have to buy everything from them, they control the solar panels, they control the parts for them, and they also control the wind turbines. We have to buy it from China. It says, aside from that, the U.S. may be vulnerable as a result of malicious actions. As they note, recent Reuters reports based on anonymous sources say that rogue communication devices were installed in solar panels coming out of China. The concern being the CCP could shut off our energy grid because of parts they had installed on solar panels. That was the concern. Now, in other news also, a movement that has been gaining traction in Europe is now coming right here to the United States. It's the right to repair. I'll be talking more about this after we come back from a quick break. And if you like my analysis, don't forget to hit the like button and also subscribe to our channel.
All right, just a pause here for a super quick moment. You are, of course, watching Crossroads with Joshua Philipp. I'm just here to share a message about American Hartford Gold, my own personal gold and silver bullion dealer. Now, obviously, the recent tariffs have made the markets super turbulent and volatile. With every new piece of tariff news, the markets seem to either crash up or crash down. And of course, it's worth mentioning that these conditions don't only affect Wall Street. They affect all of us through our investments and our retirement accounts. That's why I'd like to introduce you to a company that I trust and I myself use to secure my own savings, American Hartford Gold. They specialize in helping Americans move our assets into something tangible, into something you can actually hold, which is physical gold and physical silver, two precious metals that act as a hedge against all those decisions being made in Washington, D.C. They have an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau. They have thousands of 5-star reviews, and they make the whole buying process super simple. Your metals can be shipped directly to your door, or you can transfer your current retirement account to a tax-advantaged gold IRA. And the best part is that right now, American Hartford Gold is offering an exclusive offer. When you call them today and you mention the name Joshua, you could receive up to $15,000 in free silver with your initial investment. Take advantage of their special offer. You can either just call them at 877-260-2764 or text Joshua to 65532. All their information will also be down in the description box below. And now, back to Crossroads.
Welcome back. If you're just joining in, don't forget to hit the like button. Your support really helps grow our channel. We support your support. We appreciate that as well. But look, folks, a movement that has been gaining traction in Europe is now coming right here to the United States, and I'd say it's actually a good one for once. This is the right to repair. The Verge said this: Texas moved closer to becoming the next state with a right to repair law on the books, as the state Senate unanimously voted 31-0. Everybody joined together to pass this to finalize HB 2963. It notes it would require manufacturers to make spare parts, manuals, and necessary tools available for equipment sold or used in the country's second most populated state, Texas. Further in, it notes a press release from the United States Public Interest Research Group, PIRG, which is published for repairability laws nationwide, noted this would make Texas the 9th state with a right to repair rule and the 7th with a version that includes consumer electronics. It follows New York, Colorado, Minnesota, California, Oregon, Maine, and most recently Washington, and would be the first state on the list with a Republican-controlled government. It's interesting, actually, mostly Democrats passed this. It notes this as well. More repair means less waste. Texas produces some 621,000 tons of electronic waste per year, which creates an expensive and toxic mess. Now, thanks to this bipartisan win, it says Texans can fix that. That's according to Environment Texas Executive Director Luke Metzger. Now, basically, what does that mean? There are accusations that some tech companies intentionally make it so you cannot fix your own products. And what that means is if they break, you have to buy a new one. Anybody buy a smartphone and then find that the battery dies and you used to be able to pop the battery out and buy a new battery and pop it back in and you can't do that anymore? Well, that's because the companies want you to go buy a whole new smartphone instead of just buying a new battery. Anybody remember the days where if a device broke, you could fix it? Anyone remember Radio Shack? Now, This is a big change we've gone under, really from how technology used to be. Anyone remember when you can go to the local store, you could buy different parts. Again, I was a big fan of Radio Shack. I used to love going there. You walk into the store, there's all kinds of spare parts hanging on the wall. You could say, what do I want to fix? What do I want to buy? You could customize stuff. You could change stuff. It was a very different era. What about just basic car repair? Anyone remember when that used to be a hobby? When people used to kind of, spoof up their own cars and so on, soup it up? When you could go into your, pop your hood and fix your engine yourself? When things were in such a way where you could remove parts, change parts, fix parts, it used to be the case. You could mess with your electronics. If something broke, you could buy a new part and fix it yourself. These days, you can't really do that. It's much more difficult. Sometimes it's a closed system. Sometimes it's actually protected by copyright laws. And so if you open it up or access it, you could be violating copyright law. It's gone that far. And some are even saying that you don't even own the devices you purchase. It's gone that far. And so even if you buy the parts, you might not be able to fix it legally in some areas. And if you so much as open your device, you might even void the warranty at least. And so now that's all changing possibly, at least in some states. It might soon be legally protected. You have the right to repair your own devices, and the companies are required to have manuals and tools and parts so that you can do it. Big change, right? Now, personally, I miss those days. I liked when you could mess with your electronics. I liked when cars and devices were simple enough that you could open the hood and do your own maintenance. And with the way things have been going, well, we're gradually getting pushed out from the devices that we own. And the question is, do you even own them anymore if you don't have that right? If laws like this do go into effect, it means things could go back to the way they used to be. It might be that if your phone or computer breaks, you can buy the replacement parts and fix them yourselves. What a time, right? Now, also in other news, we're now seeing some criminal charges on fraud tied to money under good old USAID. People have been questioning, well, they're finding fraud. Where are the criminal indictments? Where are the guilty pleas? We now have them. Epoch Times said this: 4 individuals have pleaded guilty to participating in a bribery scheme involving the U.S. Agency for International Development, USAID, which resulted in 14 contracts worth more than $550 million being improperly awarded to companies involved in the fraud. The Department of Justice, DOJ, said in a June 12th statement. It notes this: Roderick Watson, 57, of Maryland, a USAID contracting officer, pleaded guilty to bribery of a public official. Walter Barnes, 46, of Maryland, the owner of Vistant, pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit bribery of a public official and securities fraud. Daryl Britt, 64, of Florida, the owner of Aprio Inc., pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit bribery of a public official. And notes as well, Paul Young, 62, of Maryland, the president of a subcontractor and to Vistant and Aprio, also pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit bribery of a public official. And notice that both Vistant and Aprio are small businesses certified under the U.S. Small Business Administration's 8A contracting program, an initiative aimed at helping businesses deemed to be socially and economically disadvantaged. Anyways, look, remember the claim from DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency. When Elon Musk was leading the whole thing, investigating it, what did they say? Well, the Trump administration also saying, they say they had found large-scale fraud and waste in the government in the budgets of different agencies. And if there's fraud and there's waste and all these other problems, well, where are the criminal charges? USAID has been one of the organizations they were focused on, and now we'll see if actual fraud charges end there, because there are now some charges, or if maybe even others could be in the pipeline. Maybe we'll see additional criminal charges, because if there was widespread fraud, as they have alleged, that means more than just 4 people. So we shall see. That said, folks, if you have a question, comment, leave it in the chat. Let's jump into some questions. Marigold, you're saying, am I the only one who feels like Winston Smith? Of course, the main character in the book 1984, right? Poor old Winston, right? Anybody who's read George Orwell's 1984, of course, it imagined a surveillance state where tyranny is maintained through the alteration of laws and alteration of language, alteration of history, and a system of mass surveillance and propaganda. What many would take is a warning of what we've done to ourselves. It seems that we've unfortunately ignored that warning, because I would actually say that most of the stuff in place currently with mass propaganda, mass surveillance, and the revisions of history. Look at the 1619 Project, for example, one of the greatest examples of revisionist fake history, brought to you by the New York Times, by the way. We've already created it. We're already living in that. And I'd say in a way much worse than Orwell could have imagined. I think the only difference is we live in kind of a public-private partnership of mass surveillance. Most of the surveillance in the U.S. is done by private companies. But the problem you have with that is because of the terms of service and you agree to it, when you agree to it, well, you let them sell it, and it's being bought not just by government agencies here in the U.S., it's even being purchased by foreign governments and other businesses and other organizations. All of your data, look, if the product is free, you are the product. That's the way to think about it. If the service is free, you are the product. And a lot of people want to buy that data to target you for different things, whether it's purchasing power or surveillance. On that point too, some people are also pointing to, anybody see that TSA pre-check or the clear thing where you can go to the front line of the airports? There are groups coming out now saying that if you did that, you have basically signed over your rights to surveillance, including social media surveillance. There are groups coming out now saying the Real ID program also works as a type of surveillance program, now being mandated. And I mean, there are some arguments for it. You want to look for terrorists, you want to look for foreign agents and spies. I understand that. I think, frankly, I'd rather not have terrorists and spies in the United States. But there's always a trade-off between security and freedom. It's a sliding scale, really. The more security you have, the less freedom you have. That's just the reality of the world. And as the Founding Fathers put it, those who would sacrifice freedom for security deserve neither, right? Another question here, Denise B. He's saying, also concerning to me is the way our country seems to be going cashless. Beginning with COVID, some stores have stopped accepting cash. Then yesterday, I was informed where I shop for groceries that there is now a $150 limit on personal checks. Interesting, right? Yeah, I don't see people using checks as much anymore. I remember when I was a kid, my mom would often, she'd often pay with check, and people used to carry around a checkbook. It used to be way more common. You barely see that these days. Most people these days pay with credit card. I'm not one to talk. I mostly buy things with credit card. But I do know a lot of people who buy everything with cash. If you stop using it, it goes away. And one issue I would raise is that if we go cashless, that is one giant leap, I'd say, towards CBDCs, centralized bank digital currencies, because paying with credit card everywhere, it's not significantly different from a centralized bank digital currency. You're going through the centralized banks for what is just credit, right? It's not that far. It's not totally tied in with everything, but it is the case. Everything you buy with a credit card is recorded. Everything. Every purchase you make, every canister of ammunition you might buy could be surveilled, as we're now seeing with the ATF surveillance issues coming out now. If you buy something that could be problematic, it is being flagged, and there are people watching it. And, again, we talk about the possible future, centralized bank digital currencies, CBDCs. We're already there on the private level. Not the government level. We're there on the private level. Private companies are already monitoring it. Private companies are already watching for it, and private companies are already flagging things. It is already taking place. Now, as a funny note, so let's go back in time, 2020, lockdowns, COVID-19, everybody's going cashless. They don't want to touch your money because they're afraid of catching COVID-19. Do you know who saved us? Who saved us from the cashless economy? Who saved us from the elimination of the US dollar? It was your good old friendly local homeless person. Homeless people saved us from a cashless society. I'm not even joking. Because the argument came out, and this was in like New York and California. If you have a homeless person begging for money, how many of you, if you want to give $1 to a homeless guy, how many of you like Venmo it to him? All right? Who out there has Venmo'd money to a homeless person? I don't know, I wouldn't do it, right? He's like, hey, just tap my phone and give me a dollar so I can buy a hamburger, right? It's probably not for a hamburger. Your local homeless person, next time you see him, thank you for keeping you safe from the introduction of a centralized bank digital currency, because they're the force protecting us. They are the watchers at the gate. They're also protecting us from the robot economy, from robots roaming the street, from the dangerous police robots, patrolling. They're the ones protecting you from the future of Amazon delivery drones. Why is that? It's because robots are filled with valuable copper, and they like to strip them for copper and then sell it for drugs. And so, thank your local homeless person for protecting us from the tyranny of the future. Right? They are the watchers at the gate, folks, the true heroes of our time. Unknown, not the heroes we wanted, but the heroes we need. Right? Anyways, another question here. Martin McKenzie, you're saying Chinese solar panels instead of good old gasoline and diesel. It would take weeks to go to the grocery store. Yeah, right? Yeah, anyways, I'm not too into the idea of having everything go solar. On an interesting point, I heard recently, do you know who likes solar panels? I'm told Amish people. I always thought that they were against electricity. Apparently, the religious element of it is against one of the systems, like in the grid or something. I don't fully understand it. But a lot of them are now installing solar panels because, it's decentralized. They can install them. I would actually say that we would be... I don't have any issue with solar panels. I do have an issue with China cornering the market. I do think that allowing the Chinese Communist Party to basically control the market on them was a terrible move. And you could say it's because we let them steal our intellectual property, and then we let them, of course, buy up all the natural resources or take them over through debt traps to gain control of the global markets and mines for rare earth minerals. If we can break the CCP's monopoly on that, I have no issue with solar panels or wind turbines or anything else. I'd say it's actually crazy we even let them bid on contracts, because if you go back in time to the Obama administration, so during the Obama administration, they indicted a group of Chinese military hackers. They indicted them, they never arrested them because we don't have an extradition treaty with the Chinese Communist Party. Those hackers were with what was known at the time the General Staff Department, 3rd Department. It was Unit 61398, I believe. And they were basically a group of Chinese military hackers who were stealing intellectual property and then providing the intellectual property they were stealing to Chinese businesses. And the Chinese businesses were building products based on the things they stole from the American company. And then we were letting them bid on contracts competing against the companies they robbed. One of the companies on that was a wind turbine company. There was an American company that invented wind turbines. The CCP's military stole their designs for those wind turbines, gave it to a Chinese company, and that Chinese company was allowed to bid on contracts to build the wind turbines in the United States and won against the company they robbed, and we let them do it. We let them do it. And so when you hear about Chinese wind turbines, they stole those from an American company. And I don't know why we allowed that. I mean, really, like, why would we allow that? Anyway, that's where we're at with the green future, right? Maybe it's the red. They used to call it watermelons, green on the outside, red on the inside, right? It's a green policy on the outside. Inside is a bunch of commie policies, like the Chinese Communist Party. Zachary Newman, you're saying, when I was in the military in the 90s, we were experimenting with fiber optics for surveillance out in fields uplinked to satellites. The idea was we could watch anyone, and eventually smart TVs would be invented, and we could watch you in your house. That's creepy. Just like the telescreens of 1984, right, where they're watching you through your television. Yeah, I'm aware that during the Cold War, so before fiber optics, a lot of it was copper, and if they wanted to like surveil a Soviet meeting or something like that, you had to have Mission Impossible spies go in and put like a clamp on the copper wire, and they could monitor stuff being transmitted across the copper wires. Fiber optics, the new age of electronic transmission. There are ways to surveil it, and I know fiber optics are incredible when you get into the technologies of how much data can be transmitted through them. A lot of people don't know this, but there's different generations of technology for fiber optics. The United States, we have very advanced fiber optics. A lot of other countries do not, and that affects the amount of information that can be transmitted through it. So what we might be able to transmit an entire building's worth on a little thing like this, in China it might have to be like this. But of course, what you're working on is just data and images being transmitted. You can monitor it. And you always could. Even electronic, wireless signals. I mean, it's kind of crazy when you think about it. What are radio signals? It is, again, things on the electromagnetic spectrum being transmitted at frequencies that we cannot see or hear. But all around you right now, there are radio signals, there are Wi-Fi signals, there's all, everything, right? All of that is actually being transmitted throughout the electronic spectrum, the electromagnetic spectrum. To make it simple, there's the electromagnetic spectrum, which is the spectrum of light, and there is the sonic spectrum, which is the spectrum of sound. And it's not secret, but there are actual military departments that focus on what they call electronic warfare. And they're fighting for the control of bandwidths. For example, people talk about 5G. There are electronic frequencies that are very hard to reach, much more secure and so on. Anybody who's radio certified knows that there are certain spectrums you're not allowed to access. That's when you start getting into like military channels, government channels, and so on. But there are some that are also encrypted, some that are, your normal devices will not have the capabilities to access certain bandwidths of the electronic spectrum, the electromagnetic spectrum. And in military, there are entire warfighting groups that focus on denial of communications, dominance of communications, monitoring of communications, and alterations of communications. For example, the Chinese Communist Party, again, I've researched them quite a bit. They have an entire military department focused on electronic warfare. I mentioned before the Chinese hackers. They've changed the military branches, under Xi Jinping. The military hackers used to be under the 3rd Department of the General Staff Department. That was your signals intelligence group. The 4th Department was the electronic warfare unit, the 4th Department. And one of the things they would do is they would monitor satellites. They would even try to alter data going into and out of satellites. And if you think about that, what does that mean? That's your internet communications. That's your phone communications. There's an entire field of warfare around that. And on the point of fiber optics, another big issue is internet infrastructure. So some of you may have seen stories about Chinese ships severing underwater cables to cut off the internet access to countries. There's a big concern they're going to do it to Taiwan, to try to cut Taiwan off from the rest of the world. Aside from just cutting the channels, And the CCP, it turns out, even invented specialized cable cutting tools to do that. So they're regarding this as warfare now. Aside from doing that, they also control what are called landing stations and switches. In some of these cable systems, there are switches. And this is concerning because you have major American tech companies that have worked with the Chinese Communist Party to build internet infrastructure. Within the infrastructure, there are switches. And the switches, they can, and it's been discovered they have been doing, they can monitor every bit of data being transmitted. And the CCP also controls what are called the landing stations. When you bring those undersea cables up onto land, you have infrastructure. At some of those landing stations, they have military departments functioning at the landing stations. And what does that mean? It means that all data being transmitted over those internet cables, which means maybe you're surfing the internet, maybe you have a website that transmits to China, anything like that. Your communications, your messages, your browser history, all of that can be monitored. Even if not, them buying stuff, all of that can be monitored. And importantly, it can also be altered. And aside from false information or censorship or whatever else, they can also use it to frame people. They can use it to frame you for crimes you did not commit. That's when you get into the secret squirrel type stuff existing within electronic warfare, especially what the CCP is doing. Anyway, wild stuff, right? There's a whole battlefield around that that I think the U.S. needs to get more engaged in, frankly, because the CCP is very aggressive on it. Seymour Butts, you're saying, Josh, what role do you think the need of AI for incredible amounts of data play into the rise of surveillance? Huge. Okay, you want to hear something interesting? Mass surveillance of everybody, is not possible without artificial intelligence because it's just too much data. I should say that it is possible, but you need a massive amount of human resources to properly monitor it. A good example of this would be the Stasi of East Germany. So World War II comes to an end. Germany is split in two. America gets West Germany. The Soviet Union gets East Germany. They build the Berlin Wall right through the country, and you have two very different Germanys. West Germany is like, the American dream, right? We build their infrastructure, we build their economy, we help them become a great nation. East Germany is like the China dream. It's like tyranny. It is communist hellhole. And they monitor everything you do and terrorize you at every moment. People trying to get from East Germany to West Germany had to go through minefields and sniper towers, and some people would risk their lives trying to do it because living there was hell on earth. They achieved true communism, you might say, right? They were living in the communist dream. One of the examples of life in East Germany was life under what was called the Stasi. And those were your Soviet agents. Those were your communist agents who would monitor everything you did. They would, of course, tap into the copper wires and monitor your electronics. They would see whether you were listening to Radio Free Europe, which for many people in the Soviet Union was like a lifeline from the West. You could get real information from the West, and you could break through the information blockade. They had systems where they would watch everything you say, where your neighbors might be spying on you and so on. And one of the issues that came about when the veil was pulled back, the Berlin Wall was torn down, which if you've ever been to Germany, by the way, you can still see, they still have monuments where parts of it are still standing. I've been there, it's incredible. It's good they've maintained it so people can remember this happened. One thing that was revealed was there was a massive number of people who had to be hired to make that level of surveillance possible. They had to recruit huge numbers of people to monitor their neighbors. And a lot of people were doing it. It's the same thing right now with any type of mass surveillance. Communist countries, they do it more commonly because I think people in those countries are more willing to, report their neighbors to maintain their own safety. The Chinese Communist Party has a lot of groups like this. There's the 50-cent army, their army of internet paid trolls. The Chinese military does a lot of this. They have a political warfare department of their military. They have huge assets focused on surveillance, monitoring, and those types of things. In the West, I don't know. Maybe we do. If we do, they don't tell us about it. But in the West, we have a few things. One example would be the Patriot Act, right? An act that was put in place to protect us from the threats of terrorism, but basically overrode some elements of the Constitution. In particular, the constitutional laws against illegal searches and seizures. We gave up some of our rights to protect us from the threats of terrorism. What did that do? It created the ability of crime that's basically pre-crime, where you can be suspected of having, terroristic ideas, and you could be arrested for it. You could be sent to Guantanamo Bay. And now, look, I'm very much against terrorism. Is that a good thing that we created those types of monitoring laws? I don't know. Maybe not. I'd say maybe in some ways. I don't know. You be the judge of that. But the real kind of Orwellian future, the type of mass surveillance where everything is monitored, that is not possible without artificial intelligence. A lot of government agencies have said this. Basically, the problem they had for a long time was not the collection of data. The problem they had was the ability to analyze data. Data analysis, searching for problematic keywords or problematic behaviors or problematic ideas or whatever else, the ability to sift through everything is not possible, or was not possible, but that has now changed thanks to artificial intelligence. And there are some legal debates in the United States over whether the use of AI to sift through everything and then flag data, whether that is a violation of the Constitution, whether it constitutes a type of pre-crime, where normally, this is how American law is supposed to work. You are not investigated unless you are suspected of committing a crime. And then they have to, of course, get a warrant and justify the ability to surveil you. That's how it normally works. And so, maybe you're running a shady business or you're doing something you probably shouldn't be doing. If you are then suspected of it, a government agency or, the police force, they can get a warrant, a search warrant. They have to go to a judge. They have to get it approved. They have to show them, this is why I believe we need to watch this person. And if the judge says, okay, you can do it, what do? Well, they can go and, search your house or maybe tap your phone or something else. But there needs to be a step to get there. There needs to be a justifiable cause, right? The exact legal term would be probable cause. They have to have probable cause to search you. And, without that, they don't have the right to search you. The Constitution protects you from that. The problem you have now is because of artificial intelligence and because of the public-private cooperation you have now, where private companies are watching you. For example, the phone in your pocket. Part of your terms and services, if you buy the phone, if you activate the phone, your computer, if you activate your operating system, you have to go through terms of service. If you download an app on your phone, it'll alert you. This can access your contacts, this can access audio recording, this can access video recording, this can access your notes, and so on. This can access your text messages. What does that mean? It means when you do that, you give them the right to surveil you. Now, that's fine and dandy, right? But what do they use it for? Well, they oftentimes sell that data to other companies that do targeted advertising. And now, it could be that when you're speaking, your phone is listening to you, and if you say, gee, I'd like to buy a brand new blue bicycle from, such and such company. And then you log into social media, and then you see an advertisement for a blue bicycle from such and such company. And you're like, wow, what a coincidence. How did they know I was looking for a blue bicycle from this exact company, and now I'm getting an advertisement for it? The reason is because you gave over your rights for them to surveil you. And there were companies buying it. Now, the problem you have is it's not just companies buying that. It's also government agencies and foreign governments. Foreign governments are buying it as well. And when you're dealing with countries like the Chinese, under the Chinese Communist Party, even Chinese companies, if they buy it, because of data laws in China, it means the Chinese government gains access to it. And there are some other countries that have laws like that as well. And so we have created for ourselves a system of mass surveillance through what are otherwise, private companies being able to access things that I don't think they should be able to access. And because of that, our constitutional rights that normally protect us against this have effectively gone away. And, just to end this, the biggest problem you have with that now is artificial intelligence. Because even with all of that data, even with, you think about every phone call which can be transcribed and monitored. If for example, someone leaves a voicemail on your phone, I assume most phones have this capability now, you might notice that it will automatically transcribe your voicemail so you can read it instead of listen to it. Why is that? It's because AI has the capability of deciphering audio and translating audio into written text. What does that mean? It means they can decipher phone calls, transcribe that, and then analyze it using artificial intelligence systems, which can then flag things. So your phone calls, your video calls, images, if you really want to get into it, there are even systems to, if you take a photograph, it is not registered as a photograph within your computer. It's registered as data. They call it metadata, right? Metadata. There are AI systems that can analyze even metadata being transmitted over the internet. People talk about the dark net or the dark web. There are two sides of that. One of that is, it used to be a naval system maintained for encrypted communications. You do have some websites on the dark web, but most of the dark web is just metadata. It's the back end of websites. It's the metadata of images. It's, the metadata of videos. The bulk of the internet is just massive amounts of data. You have technologies that can decipher all of that. One of the systems, I actually know one of the developers, one of the systems is called Memex. And it's tied in with, I think Google actually is able to use it. But the concern with that is if you take that and then combine it with an artificial intelligence system capable of monitoring, deciphering, and flagging it, nothing is not being seen. Everything is being monitored. And that's not even just you on the internet searching for things or taking pictures or whatever. That is your device in your pocket recording your audio. That is the device in your pocket transmitting your location. That is the device in your pocket watching and listening to everything. And so while we all were horrified by the Stasi, we are living under a private Stasi, thanks mostly to social media and the devices which we've become so addicted to, unfortunately. Last question here from Kathleen White. You're saying, why won't China use their phenomenal intelligence for good rather than for evil? The simple answer is because of the Chinese Communist Party. China without the Chinese Communist Party, I think, would be a blessing to the world. China without the Chinese Communist Party would probably not have any issues. China without the CCP would be fantastic. The Chinese Communist Party is like a parasite. It brings almost no benefit, no benefit at all to the Chinese people. It's the greatest abuser of the Chinese people. I believe it will collapse. I think that's coming up sooner rather than later. And maybe then, once the CCP collapses, China will use these capabilities for good rather than for evil. And what a great day that shall be. All right, everyone, thank you so much for being here. Let me know in the chat, do you think it's worth it? Tell me, do you think the type of surveillance and monitoring and everything else we have, is it worth it? Is it worth living in a glass house? Do you think that this is impacting your mental stability? Do you think the constant surveillance is in fact putting you in fight or flight mode? Are you afraid of saying things out loud these days because of how it could be determined to be, offensive by somebody? How do you feel? Do you feel you're not able to speak your mind? Do you feel that you are under threat for maybe even committing crimes that you did not commit because of the way mass surveillance works? Do you wonder where that could lead you? Let me know in the comments what you think about it. And, do you think it's a worthwhile trade-off? Do you accept this as a terms and service agreement because you think what you're getting in return is better? Let me know. I'm curious where you all stand on this. That said, please hit the like button, share this video. I will see you all again tomorrow, 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time. And as always, please take care of yourselves, stay informed, stay free. Thank you.